Hello and welcome back to the Green Line Gazette. This is episode 16 of our podcast. Remember, we're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and Substack. Today, we're going to be breaking down the USA Game 1 Paraguay World Cup 2026 kicking off this Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern. I am psyched out of my mind. We're playing Paraguay on the West Coast. It should be a good one. Here, I'm going to break down probably go through potential starting 11s for both sides, and then, obviously tactics and what to expect out of this game before we go into a little bit of, USMNT World Cup history, which has been quite sparse to put it bluntly. But without further ado, I see no other reason why we don't start with the United States' starting 11. So funny enough, actually, we're going to start a goalkeeper here. No clue. Nobody has a clue. A day ago, Poch said he didn't even know, is it going to be Turner or is it going to be Freese? There's been nothing on the media as of this is 8 p.m. Wednesday night, June 10th. There's nothing outside the media, anything being said about who's going to start in net for us this coming Friday. So we're just going to have to wait. Again, as I did on episode 15, I think I'm going to pull for Turner here. Like we said, yes, he's a little shaky with the ball at his feet, but I think overall he's just a better shot stopper. I think he has that World Cup experience already under his belt, and what's going to be, I think, in a very aggressive, high energy, very intense game against a South American side like Paraguay. I think Turner will fare a little better than Freese, who I think this would be a tough World Cup debut to have against a team that's really not going to cut you any slack. They're going to be, pretty crazy in the press. I think you start Turner again. We will see. Nobody knows as of right now. I think Turner should be the call just based off that experience. Again, would not be surprised if you see Freeze come in, later games or whatnot. Defending. My best guess, I think we're going to play kind of that 5-3-2 with the two wing backs. So starting at the center backs, Chris Richards, as of today, has announced he is ready to go. He is, I don't know if fully healthy is the correct word, but he sounds like he will be making a start, and it sounds like he's in good enough health to play a World Cup game. That's very exciting. He was elite for Crystal Palace in their honestly, they're, between FA Cup, Community Shield, and Conference League trophy runs. I think he played a huge part in that. I'm really excited to see how that's going to translate to the international game here. Again, elite aerial duel winner, routinely winning above about 70 to 75%, especially on set pieces, which, as we know, are, so very critical, especially against a team like Paraguay, where if you watch their film, a lot of goals are scrappy, bouncing around the box, second chances, capitalizing on a mistake within the opponent's defending third. So having a guy like Richards who can really patrol, basically everything is very, very comforting to me, to be honest. So very excited to have Chris Richards back. I don't know really where they would play him on that back line. Because it's going to be, let's see. I guess we'll get there in a sec, but right now I have predicting Tim Ream obviously being the captain, and then Mark McKenzie from Toulouse. Richards is right-footed, so he's either going to be playing probably directly in that middle, but I mostly think he's going to be playing in that right center back position. I think we're going to leave the center of the field for Tim Ream, our 38-year-old captain. Again, we talked about it last episode. When he gets beat really bad. He doesn't have that pace, but he has the composure. He has the leadership. He has the mental and the soccer IQ on the pitch, which is reassuring. He doesn't fold under pressure, especially with the ball. He's very comfortable with it on his feet, as we saw in the Germany game, which again, I think we actually played quite well despite the scoreline. I mean, we subbed out most of our actual quality players by halftime when it was already 1-1 off the Jedi Robinson just wonder goal, which we will get to later. But even, during the Germany game and during the Senegal game, Tim Ream looked really comfortable on the ball. Although, right, just said it, when he gets burnt bad. I'm a little worried about that, especially with a Paraguay team who you can expect to play very direct, over the top through balls. Not a lot of tiki taka, if you want to put it that way. It's going to be more kind of shove it into the defense and, just wait for that lucky break or wait for a mental lapse on someone from the back line, catch him in transition type of goal. So for that reason, Ream kind of worries me. I think he'll be at the middle center back position there. And then I think on his left, you're going to have Mark McKenzie from Toulouse. He's played great in these World Cup warm-up games. He plays very direct with the long ball, skips the midfield all the time, finds our forwards, which I actually love to have a guy who can play his own long ball. He has his own podcast called The Orange Slices, which is a soccer footy podcast that I was listening to today. Funny enough. So he's also a great dude, but I'm just, I'm excited to have that vertical threat because I think we've lacked that. And, perhaps maybe we haven't lacked it, but we've lacked a quality player who can play that vertical threat with a quality long ball. So that makes me really excited that Mark McKenzie, I think, should be getting that left center back start. Or he also could be playing that middle center back and shifting Tim Ream around again. This is kind of the beauty of Poch's system. It's very fluid. We have a lot of players who can play a lot of different positions, especially on that back line. So I don't think the specifics matter that much. Again, he could start on the left and then through transition, he gets stuck right side of the field, whatever it may be. I think he's going to fare, without any problem, to be honest. Moving on to the midfield, right? I mean, not to, play the broken record or however that saying goes, but right, we are without Tyler Adams. If something happens, it's going to be scary. Of course, he will be starting, the Bournemouth man. I think he's probably the most critical player to our success in this World Cup, just him staying healthy and him being able to stay on the field. Former captained us in 2022 at Qatar. He was the youngest captain at the tournament. This guy is a leader. The amount of tackles he wins back in the middle third and the amount of ball recoveries he gets after giving it away himself, which, right, it happens to everybody, but he is in the 90th plus percentile for all of that. I think one of the best defensive and holding midfielders in the Prem this year. Obviously, we'll be getting the start. Very excited to see how that goes, but I am still just very, very worried what happens if he cannot stay on the field. Knock on wood, nothing happens. But when he will be on the field, it's going to be, a sigh of relief for USMNT fans, no doubt about that. I think to his side or a little bit in front of him, obviously you're going to have Weston McKennie from Juventus. Those late runs we talked about last episode, he will surely do those, especially in against a Paraguay team who plays, a little bit of a higher line at some times. And I think McKennie can really, if we can get in behind those lines, force Paraguay to track back, I don't think they're really going to be looking out for McKennie all that much. And, you find him on the edge of the box and you let him have a go. And I think, more often than not, that ends, pretty well for Weston McKennie. So, he again ranks very high, touches in the 18, the opposing 18, the attacking 18, I guess, and expected assisted goals, right? XAG. This guy's a playmaker. He's gonna, be absolutely, glorious for us. I think this tournament, barring anything, bad happening. He does have a card history at times, but I don't really see that being a problem. Moving on. I think you could really go either way here. You could go Gio Reyna, who, right, has the experience, has played in big games before. Or I think you go Malik Tillman from Bayer Leverkusen, right? Um, Switched his allegiance to the US in 2022 after representing Germany at the youth levels. He has played out of his mind, not only in Bundesliga, but in the World Cup warm-up matches and in the Nations League that took place earlier this year. He is a monster on the press, right? Wins the ball in the attacking third all the time, always creating turnovers. Um, he's the perfect player for like a high intensity pressing system, which I think, you know, with the five in that middle with those two wing backs, I think that's exactly what we're going to be going for. So, although, Reyna has had that experience, I really, really, really want Poch to start Tillman, excuse me, and I really think he will. I hope I, don't eat my words there, but I think Tillman has found a spot in the starting 11, and not only has he found it, I think he has deserved it over Gio Reyna right at the moment. I just don't think Reyna's form is what it once was, and I think it's time, right? If we want to progress as a federation, as a soccer federation, I think you need to start maybe taking risks and, right, I get Reyna's, dad, Claudio, was, right, former captain, royalty, right? It is what it is. Reyna's obviously capped for the US, numerous times, but I think you go, bolder here, and I think you have to give Tillman that last midfield spot over him. And then up top, right, shocking to absolutely nobody, AC Milan, Christian Pulisic, Captain America, dominates the squad, at least our squad, in progressive carries into the penalty area, and build up in the XG. He has been doing this for a long time. I believe he has 33 goals for the national team. And I believe he has 31 since joining AC Milan. Obviously, he's going to be in the starting 11. He had a wonderful World Cup in 2022. I think you can expect that to carry over without a doubt. And I think on his right or left side, depending how they want to play this, you're going to have Florian Belgen from Monaco. I think he has earned it. I think he played so well, especially in that Senegal game where he could have scored. I mean, he scored a goal, right? But he could have realistically almost had four, right? The offsides, hitting the post twice, getting really unlucky. He is in top form right now. The U.S. needs someone who is not afraid to shoot the ball and does not hesitate, and that's who Balogun has been for us recently. He ranks extremely high in non-penalty goals per 90 and shots on target percentage. What I love about him, we talked about this in the last episode, is he shoots a lot, but he rarely shoots from low probability angles, which just makes him that more dangerous because when he's winding up to take one, it's a high probability chance. And I'm sure, right, the defenders and the midfielders marking him also know that, which sets them up for a perfect feint or whatever it may be if they want to stick their leg out or make a diving tackle, and that just opens up the pitch that much more. So that's who I think our starting 11 is going to be. That's who I hope it's going to be, and I think that's pretty realistic. Again, toss-ups are Tillman and then the goalkeeper dilemma. Again, I want Turner. If it's not Turner and they go with Freeze, it's obviously not the end of the world. I think Freeze is a pretty strong goaltender. So I really don't have a problem with that. But again, if I had preference, that's probably who I would go with. All right, moving on. Now we have Paraguay's starting 11. They have a very interesting makeup of players, I would say, who I think you can expect to see in that starting 11. In goal, you're going to have Orlando Gil from San Lorenzo in the Argentina Liga. Overall, very solid goaltender, has played for Paraguay numerous times before, had a pretty solid season in the Argentinian first division. That's a very, high intensity league, right? Just how I said Paraguay would play. So I don't think atmosphere, or I don't think, the moment being too big is something that's going to falter Gil, just because of how ridiculous those Argentinian league games are with the atmosphere and how intense the fans can be. So I think that's also what maybe gives Paraguay a little bit of a leg up here is because they have so many South American domestic league players, whether that's from Brazil or Argentina, whatever it may be, just the atmospheres in South America are just so much more unhinged than they are in Europe and in North America. And with that unhinged atmosphere, you get, composure out of your players. And I think Paraguay will definitely have that composure with no doubt. Starting on the back line, I think it's going to be Juan Caceres from Dynamo Moscow, obviously in the Russian Premier League. Um, Not super impressive player. He's definitely serviceable and solid. He struggles with tracking runners, which is why I think McKinney hopefully can take advantage of him and just catch him sleeping or catch him with his eyes one way. Um, he's all right in the air, I would say. If we're gonna have those long balls coming in from McKenzie to either Pulisic or Balogun. From the stuff I have watched of Caceres, he does miss time balls. Not often, but I would say a noticeable amount. So I think maybe all you really got to do is maybe test him and see if he can, misplace one and then it goes right over his head. Excuse me, had to blow my nose there. Apologies. Moving on the back line, you're going to have Gustavo Gomez, right? Paraguay's long serving captain. I think he's been doing it for at least 10 plus years. He plays for Palmeiras and the Brazilian Serie A. Um, Very solid player, very physical player, which Paraguay benefits from having. Obviously, he's like their anchor, I would say. Um, Difficult to really, be in those 50-50 balls. He will always meet you there and he will go through his tackles quite strongly and oftentimes cleanly. So he's a hard guy to win off the ball. Taking him one-on-one, he's all right. And I think that's how you're going to really have to do. I think that's the key to exposing this back line is getting it in indirectly. I don't think taking it one-on-one is smart with how athletic and quite frankly, just how physical these guys are. Um, Especially his partner, both of them, Junior Alonso on the outside and Omar Alderete on the other side. Alderete had a wonderful season for Sunderland this year in the Prem. Obviously, they're playing European football in their first year back of promotion, which is, honestly just awesome to see, in my opinion. And Alderete played a huge role in that. Very versatile player, played for Sunderland. He played on the wing as a wing back, obviously as the outside back. He played in the middle at times. He's really their Swiss Army knife, and I think you can really say that about Junior Alonso as well from Atletico MG, also in the Brazilian Serie A. Both of their outside backs, like the U.S., are high intensity, high energy playmakers. So I'm very excited to see how Alderete and Alonso are going to line up against the likes of, a Jedi Robinson, obviously, or a Dest, whoever, whatever side they decide to, force that matchup to. I think it's going to be very cool to watch. I think Alonso and Alderete are probably the strongest aspect of this lineup for Paraguay. Although that's not taking away from some of the other players they have who have been very good, such as their box-to-box midfielder, Damian Bobadilla, Sao Paulo, Brazilian Serie A. Very similar to McKinney, who can really just, all over the field, be where he needs you, or where you need him to be. He can play almost any position centrally. Doesn't really go out wide too often. But he tracks back like a madman. He's got really good stamina. He's going to be a pest in that midfield. And, I looked up some of his film from Sao Paulo this year, and that's exactly what he did. He just makes everybody miserable in that midfield with just how pesty and, aggressive he is. And then, right, his partner, an MLS player actually from the Vancouver Whitecaps, Andreas Cubas, is, I would say, a weaker link in this, lineup. I would hesitate to call him top MLS talent. I think he's all right. I think he's really a mid-level player, and I really think the US are gonna look to exploit him. If they can get Bobadilla occupied, I think Kubas is gonna have a hard time, especially if they take him one-on-one or drive right at him. He's very indecisive. He makes a lot of dumb fouls. He panics on the ball when he gets pressured, and when he doesn't, he often carries it too long, in my opinion. So I think if you're the US, you have to go after Kubas here. Um, no hate to him, obviously, but I think in a pretty strong Paraguay lineup, he just happens to be one of those weaker links, to be honest. Um, Attacking mid, Diego Gomez from Brighton, one of their stronger players, in my opinion. I think he played quite well for Brighton, who had, a pretty decent season, to be honest, right? A lot of ups and downs. And I think through those up and downs, Gomez stayed quite consistent. I think he should be playing their attacking mid, linking up with their forwards. So, you know, a little, I'm not, I wouldn't say worried, but I would be definitely watching him closely because I think a lot of their offensive game flows through Gomez, especially I don't really think they skip the midfield too often from what I've seen out of Paraguay's national team. They really like to play it through all parts of the field. And I feel like almost every goal Gomez has, a touch or at least a very important touch in that buildup. And he can just put it right up to Julio and Ciso, right, from Strasbourg. Young talent, really exciting. I think he has 4 goals for Paraguay. Did not too much in League One, but again, he is a really young guy, right? And it's the World Cup. This is where you want to show out for, those contracts or that big move. And if you're a young guy like him, there's absolutely nothing holding you back from trying to be, the Paraguayan hero, especially after having a lackluster, league season. So I would watch out for Enciso. Paired up with him is old Newcastle man Miguel Almiron, now at Atlanta in the MLS. Despite his move down to the MLS from the Prem, I would still be cautious of him. I still think, even his latter half of his career being at Atlanta and whatnot, I think he's still, I think he's still a threatening player. I still think he can make things happen. He obviously, I think class is permanent, to be honest. I think, playing in the Prem is, this is nothing new to him, right? Big games are, especially at Newcastle, right? He was there during those UCL runs, beating PSG at home, whatnot. I think he'll still have that class, and I don't think people should look him off, to be honest. And then right next to him, we have Antonio Sanabria from Cremonese in the Serie A. Didn't play too well this year. But again, he's a really fast, twitchy player, loves to take people one-on-one, loves to get in behind, and will really shoot from those low angles. So if they play him in, left or right of that 6-yard box, he often tries to just put it over that right or left shoulder of the goalkeeper into those top corners. And he's honestly pretty effective, to be quite honest. But that's who I think will probably start for Paraguay. You might see some variations come Friday, maybe with Kubas or, whoever it might be. But I think that's, I think you could say that's set in stone, to be quite honest. All right, moving on, we're going to do just a little rundown, right? Educate some people, remind people, perhaps reminisce, if you will, of, previous Paraguay matchups, of course, but more importantly, how the U.S. has done in said World Cups that we have been in. But as for Paraguay, this is our 10th time meeting, second time at the World Cup. We've met twice in the CONMEBOL Copa America. Last time we played them, we won 2-1 in November of 2025. And it was, like I said, a high intensity, very scrappy, very physical, tempers flared type of game. That's only going to be amplified on the World Cup stage now. You can expect that. I think you can expect a fair amount of cards. Red cards, I think, only really will come in this game, probably late game if people are losing their heads. But I think you're going to get a fair amount of yellow cards, just like there was in that friendly. First time we ever matched up with them was in the 1930 World Cup in Uruguay, which was about 96 years ago. So a little bit of a full circle moment here for the USMNT. But in that 1930 World Cup, that inaugural one, It was the US's obviously highest finish ever. We came third. We beat Belgium 3-0. We beat Paraguay 3-0. And then we got absolutely smoked by Argentina 6-1 in that semifinal. We finished third on goal differential over Yugoslavia because there was no third place game in 1930. Still, that remains our highest finish in World Cup history, coming in third again. That was 96 years ago. You really hope that the U.S. can put together a good run as it is. 1934 goes to Italy. We make it to the round of 16. That's that. Again, these early World Cups, the field was quite small, which you should remember, which, can partially explain that 1930 run because there was not a lot of international teams at the time. 1938 in France, we withdrew, of course, because of World War II happening at that time. So essentially from 34 to 1990, we did not qualify for a World Cup. The World Cup resumed in 1954. So from 54 to 86, we did not qualify. Obviously didn't end up playing in that 38 World Cup. So we really went from 1934 to 1990, which when it went back to Italy, absolute disaster for the U.S. 3 losses in the group stage. Czechoslovakia destroyed us 5-1. Italy gets us 1-0, and then Austria 2-1. So after almost basically a 56-year wait, we did not, perform as you would want. 1994, when it comes to the U.S., we draw Switzerland 1-1. We have the infamous game where we beat Colombia 2-1 in the Rose Bowl, I believe it was. Of course, I think most people remember Andres Escobar, who scored the own goal for Colombia. Any of those who do not know the story, he scored that own goal, and then 10 days later, he is murdered outside of a nightclub back in Colombia. Highly theorized that he was murdered because of this moment, because he lost the game for Colombia, which is quite awful. So, of course, we remember him and the horrible story that is during that Colombia game where the U.S. was able to pull away 2-1. And then following that, we lost to Romania 1-0. And then in the round of 16, we lost to Brazil 1-0. So, again, better, not great. 1998 France, again, 3 straight L's. We scored 0 goals in this tournament. We lost 2-0 to Germany, 2-0 to Iran. And then at the time, what was Serbia and Montenegro, their national team was called FR Yugoslavia. They beat us 1-0, and just an absolutely embarrassing showing for the United States. Getting to 2002, so from 2002 all the way up till now, I'm going to highlight kind of that first game for the U.S., given how Paraguay is this first game. So 2002 was the U.S.'s highest ever finish in the World Cup since that 1930 World Cup, and probably the more legitimate finish because of the field was a lot more full. More countries had competent national teams or fielded national teams at all. So, of course, we open. I think every USMNT fan remembers. I mean, I obviously wasn't alive for this, but I've heard the stories. I've watched the highlights more times than I can remember. We beat Portugal 3-2. Right, John O'Brien in the 4th minute. Just roaring start. We went up 3-0 inside 37 minutes. George Paulo Costa with the own goal, which really, kind of put the game away at the time. And then Brian McBride with that diving header from Tony Senna. And, you probably, if you were watching that in real time, obviously I wasn't, I don't think you could believe your eyes, right? This U.S. team, you're playing Portugal, who was a favorite that year and probably one of the best teams of, that 90s to early 2000s era that probably had ever been put together. And all of a sudden, the U.S. team that scored 0 goals in 1998 has now scored 3 in 37 minutes against Portugal. This was Landon Donovan's first World Cup appearance. Just to put this in reference, right? So this Portugal team had Luis Figo, who was the reigning FIFA Player of the Year, playing in that midfield. They had Rui Costa up top. They had João Pinto as that goal scorer. They had Jorge Costa on the defense, right? Like, this Portugal team was just, like I said, one of the best teams in the world, especially with like prime Figo. Um, I just, I really wish I was alive to witness this, because this is absolutely insane. Portugal did end up getting 2 back in that second half, or 1 before the half, I believe, and then 1, shortly after. But thankfully, the U.S. was able to hold on there. Right, Claudio Reyna didn't play. He injured his hamstring that game, where he was replaced by Pablo Mascheroni, which I think makes it even that much more impressive, given how big of a role Claudio Reyna played in that USMNT lineup, and for him not to play against one of the best teams in the world and then to pull that off is absolutely nuts, right? Obviously, and that 2002, also fun fact, was Japan and Korea. So this is the first time a World Cup had ever been hosted by more than one country, and the last time it had ever happened before coming to North America this year, which, interesting little fact there, I guess. But right, that 2002 run, probably the US's most legitimate run coming out of Group D. After that Portugal game, we draw host nation South Korea 1-1. Matisse scored that. Probably pretty impressive, given how, playing on home soil is never easy. And then Landon Donovan scores for us in that 1-3 loss to Poland. And we get out of the group just barely. Round of 16, we play Mexico. If you had to take a wild guess, I'm sure you could get the score. It was 2-0, how it always ends. McBride and Donovan, bag the winner there for the U.S. And we go on to the quarterfinals, which is, again, I think the actual farthest we ever made it, not to discount that 1930 team, but games definitely evolved and a little different, where I think we narrowly, lost 1-0 to Germany. So we were right that close to, a semifinal appearance. And, I think that it just, right, it goes to show how much variance is in the World Cup, right? A little fact, I don't know if you guys know this, but in 2010, obviously Spain wins the World Cup. 2012 they win the Euros. Since 2010, Spain has won. I don't think anybody could guess this off the top of their head. Spain has won 3 World Cup games since winning it in 2010. So in 2014, they only beat Australia 3-0. That was the only win they had. 2018, they beat Iran 1-0. And then, of course, in Qatar, they smashed Costa Rica 7-0. But since winning the World Cup, they have won 3 individual World Cup games over 3 World Cups, with a lot of draws and then a lot of exits in the round of 16. And probably since 2010, Spain has been one of the best, if not like the best national team consistently in most tournaments. And then they come to the World Cup and they can barely win. That should show you how much of a wild card the World Cup really is, right? The U.S. was one or 2 goals away from being a semifinalist in 2002, which is why I'm really high on us this year, to be honest. I think if the cards fall right, this is a really strong lineup, and I think, there is a deep run perhaps in sight. Just because teams have a big name doesn't mean anything, right? You can think of Italy, who's missed the last 3 World Cups. Even crazier stat, to be honest. I mean, Italy won in 2006. Since 2006, they have won 1 World Cup game. And that was obviously in 2010. And then they missed in 14-22. And obviously this year with that heartbreaker to Bosnia. So with that being said, just goes to demonstrate how wild these games can be. And I think the U.S. does have a real chance, right? Like, I don't think there's any shame in saying that, to be honest. Sorry, excuse me. All right, 2006. Not the start you want. We lose to the Czech Republic 3-0. Casey Keller was just shelled by Jan Koller and Thomas Rosicki. That back line was super weak. Steve Sherarundolo, Eddie Pope, Eddie Lewis, Oguchi Onweyu, Claudio Reyna as the captain, the early days of Landon Donovan. Not the start you want. Hopefully not one that we come close to recognizing in the slightest, right? We were in Group E that year in Germany. We went on to tie Italy 1-1, the year they won. And then, of course, we lost to Ghana in that heartbreaker with the Dempsey goal 2-1. Not a great showing. And I mean, as we walk through this, you'll see every time the US start with a strong performance, they often make it out of the group and even, maybe win a round of 16 game. Every time they get shelled or perform poorly in that opening game, it really sets the tone for the tournament, which is why I think this Paraguay game is so important. I just cannot state that enough, to be honest. Moving on, 2010, we drew England 1-1, who was probably a favorite at the time. This is where that famous headline comes from, like the newspaper, United States wins 1-1. We were huge underdogs here. Just to give you, a little perspective, right? 2010 was 16 years ago. England, ready? Just their notable players too. They had a lot more players who were, quite class at the time. You have John Terry, you have Ashley Cole, you have Frank Lampard, you have their captain and goal scorer in the 4th minute, Steven Gerrard. You have James Milner, who is somehow still playing right now, holds the Premier League appearance all-time record. You had Jamie Carragher, funny enough, Peter Crouch, and Wayne Rooney. And you are the U.S., and if you read that lineup, these are just some of the best players in the absolute world. Of course, though, the man of the match, Tim Howard, who made 8 saves. Clint Dempsey scores in the 40th minute. This was, kind of prime USMNT Michael Bradley, Josie Altidore, right? Forgotten baller, Landon Donovan. But really, I mean, this was a gritty win by the U.S. Dempsey's goal was honestly a fluke. You can go watch it back. Robert Green, West Ham keeper at the time, just fumbled it and had an absolute howler, and it just allowed the U.S. to expose England for being sloppy. Josie Altidore really showed how, slow England's center backs were. And I think the USA, right, just grinded it out against, obviously the US was the inferior opponent there. And that's where, that the saying comes from, right? The US won 1-1. Like we also won 0-0 in 2022, and we'll get there. But, started the tone again, right? We go on to draw Slovenia 2-2 with Donovan and Bradley scoring, and then we beat Algeria with a Donovan goal. Of course, this is 2018, right? The round of 16, the heartbreaker and extra time to Ghana, the Donovan goal. Everybody remembers that. I mean, I was only 6 years old at the time, and I still remember watching that game, how much that hurt. But it was quite the good run there from the U.S. They showed their class by starting strong, and we can hope to do that again. 2014, right? This is the Ghana game, right? This is the revenge game. Probably, I think, my favorite USMNT game of all time. We beat Ghana 2-1. Clint Dempsey scores the 5th quickest goal in World Cup history inside the 1st minute. Ghana responds in the 82nd minute. Andre Ayew, with that goal, they had been kind of chipping away, knocking at the doorstep, and they finally got that goal. And then enter John Brooks, that header off the corner. I mean, absolute chills for all USMNT fans. What a moment that was. He was playing for Hertha Berlin, in the Bundesliga at the time. I mean, they're now in the 2 Bundesliga, but, just the unlikely hero, one of his first touches of the game, right off his head into that corner. I mean, I remember going absolutely insane. This was this prime, Rio World Cup, like best memories of all time. U.S. starting basically, the best way possible. Of course, this team featured Tim Howard. DeMarcus Beasley became the first American to play in 4 World Cups. This was Jermaine Jones. Josie Altidore was injured in the 21st minute, if you remember, which, I think makes this win all that more impressive, just, of how battered we were, right? Because you also remember Clint Dempsey, captain of that World Cup, broke his nose with a knee to the face. Again, hard to play through. Ghana had eliminated us in the past 2 World Cups. uh, as I had said. And, to come back, right? That's also Michael Bradley. I forgot to mention him, just came to mind. To come back and do that and start the way you do is just, I mean, it was beautiful. This was, peak football. And then, I mean, why 2014 was, so magical. Of course, we get out of the group there because we drew, a Ronaldo-led Portugal team in Ronaldo's prime, 2-2. Jones and Dempsey again scoring. We lose to Germany in that last game, but this was the group of death that year. And somehow, we made it out in some miraculous fashion. Obviously Germany went on to win it that year, and we only lost to them by a goal. Portugal, we grouped them, which just sounds insane to say at the time. And of course, Ghana got grouped as well. We fell to Belgium in extra time. Just absolute heartbreaker again. Back-to-back World Cups, falling 2-1 in the round of 16 in extra time against two quality sides. Again, you start hot and you play quite well. I think the U.S. have just gotten unlucky. 2018, I won't even mention that. We're just going to move on. 2022, again, quite the interesting performance. We drew Wales 1-1. Of course, that way a goal, and then the Bale penalty in like the 86th minute. We went on to draw England 0-0 and then beat Iran 1-0. We scored 2 goals all group stage, made it to the round of 16, and then we just ran into that Netherlands team who almost beat, the World Cup champion that year, Argentina, literally coming down to the dying moments. So not the strongest start, but again, a strong enough start where we did not get grouped. And really all of this is to say, going through that history is, right, you start strong, you finish strong. Right, so we're going to be taking on Paraguay Friday, right? Then we have Australia and Turkey. I think this is one of the stronger groups in the World Cup. So I think this game is just really that important. I'm super excited. Remember, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Get out there, go support the USMNT. I really think we can make a statement on North American soil this year. That's all I have for now. I will be back after the game with a recap of how the Paraguay game went, hopefully with positive things to say. And then I will be previewing the Australia game in that same episode. And then, of course, after the Australia game, we'll recap Australia and preview Turkey. And then hopefully we get to do that for the round of 16 and so on. Thank you again for listening to episode 16. Remember, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and Substack. Please give us a listen. We really appreciate the support we have been getting recently. Follow us on Instagram at Greenline Gazette. All I have for now, stay well and show your support for the U.S.